The former England boss, Sam Allardyce, attacks the press after newspaper revelations force him to step down as manager.
Unfortunately, it was an error in judgment on my behalf, and I paid the consequences. But, you know, entrapment has won on this occasion, and...
Further damaging claims about past and present managers in English football have been published today. They all deny any wrongdoing. Critics say the huge amounts of TV money in the game make bending the rules far too tempting. Also this lunchtime. More splits in the Labour Party, this time on immigration, as a spokesman for Jeremy Corbyn says the leader isn't concerned about numbers. Is it the end of the road for the junior doctors dispute? The High Court rules the Health Secretary can impose a new contract. Samantha Jeffries, the widow of a Falklands veteran, wins a legal battle to save her frozen embryos from being destroyed. Shimon Peres, one of the last of a generation of Israeli politicians who founded the nation, has died at the age of 93. And thanks for the memories. Tom photobombs a young couple's wedding day snaps.
Here, a big drop in the number of drivers caught using mobile phones behind the wheel. And a world first, a new treatment for bowel cancer being trialled here in the south.
A very good afternoon to you and welcome to the BBC News at 1. Sam Allardyce says he had to stand down as England manager because of the entrapment of a newspaper. He criticised the Daily Telegraph for a secret recording appearing to show him telling undercover journalists how to get around transfer rules. He insists he's parted amicably with the FA and hasn't ruled out a return to football. Mr Allardyce is the shortest-serving England manager in history, lasting just 67 days. Our sports correspondent Richard Conway has more.
His suitcase is packed. Sam Allardyce is leaving the country on holiday after having to leave his job. And while he is regretful of his words, he believes he was entrapped by undercover reporters.
On reflection, it was a silly thing to do, but just to let everybody know, I sort of helped out what was somebody I'd known for 30 years, and unfortunately it was an error in judgment on my behalf, and I paid the consequences. But you know, entrapment has won on this occasion, and I have to accept that.
I would have thought £100,000 a time.
The Football Association took a dim view of Allardyce's actions in securing an in-principle £400,000 deal with journalists posing as businessmen. So too his words about avoiding transfer regulations and his disparaging remarks about his predecessor, Roy Hodgson. With the FA needing to uphold its values as the legal and moral guardians of the game, his position as England boss was deemed untenable. The Daily Telegraph has today alleged that 8 current or former Premier League managers have taken bribes for player transfers. Their filming shows an agent saying he knew a former manager who had more backhanders than Wimbledon.
There's one thing that I've always been able to rely on, and that is the greed of general managers.
With the threat of more damaging headlines to come, the Sports Minister Tracy Crouch has now outlined her concerns, saying the integrity of sport is absolutely paramount, and we have been clear that we expect the highest standards of governance and transparency from sports governing bodies here in the UK and on the international stage.
You've not seen this one before, have you?
But some sports agents believe the global nature of the modern game is at the root of the problem.
There are elements in our game, some of which are to do with foreign ownership, and I don't castigate foreigners, they're very welcome here. Their ownership is colourful in many cases, but they bring with them various business practices in some corners which light needs to be shone on, because those parts of the business are unregulated and answerable to nobody, and that's where the game starts to spiral out of financial control.
For now, the FA must start its search for Sam Allardyce's permanent successor, but it must also continue to provide reassurance that it can safeguard the game from the ills that seemingly surround it.
Richard, this is all so embarrassing for the guardians of the game. What could all this mean for the Football Association?
I think that in the immediate future, the things that the FA will be looking at are reform. It's been trying to reform for some time. It's been trying to reform its processes, the FA Council, for example, and has been unable to do that because of resistance within the structures of the game itself, within the structures of the organisation. If that doesn't happen, if it can't reform, then regulation may be put upon it. It's interesting to see Tracy Crouch today saying that she wants to seek talks, the government minister looking for talks with the football authorities. That threat of outside regulation, if football can't get its own house into order, has been there for some time. I think while Sam Allardyce's comments were beyond the pale for the FA yesterday, that threat of regulation, that threat of having to be seen to be doing the right thing, to be taking the right course of action, to have probity and integrity in what it does, was at the forefront of its mind. So I think that's where we'll see this debate in the wider context go next. But for now, the FA must try and steady the ship, reassure the sport that it is doing the right thing, that there is probity within the sport itself, and in the immediate, in terms of the football aspect of things, try and find someone who can take on the England team.
Very interesting. OK, Richard, many thanks. Richard Conway there. Jeremy Corbyn will set out plans this afternoon to help local communities deal with the impact of immigration. But his address to the Labour conference in Liverpool risks upsetting some on his front bench who believe there should be a commitment to cut the number of people coming to Britain. A spokesman for Mr Corbyn says he's not concerned about numbers. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has more.
The final morning of what's been a difficult conference for the Labour Party. Today, delegates will hear from the man elected again as their leader. They're clear the focus must now be on the party's future, not the bruising politics of the past year.
This afternoon we need to hear the word unity from Jeremy.
I want to hear him really sort of get behind party policy.
Really important about the economic policy, I think, because I think that's the thing that's going to swing it in the end, yes.
In his closing speech, Jeremy Corbyn will promise to end the trench warfare in Labour. His aim, a message of unity.
We are there.
But his words on immigration will also be scrutinised, after his spokesman said the focus was protecting jobs and wages, not cutting numbers. Many agree easing pressure on communities is key, and Labour is promising a fund to do just that.
You can get into numbers game, and that doesn't really help us, because what we need to be doing is actually building our communities. And most communities will, we say we're multicultural. We know we are. In Oldham, we're very multicultural in Tameside. But the issue has been about, well, actually, when we're undercutting wages, so people can't get jobs, or when they do get jobs, they can't live off the money that they earn, then that's not helpful. When we haven't got council housing, when we've not got the houses that we need because they're in short supply, that creates tensions.
Thank you, Andy. But there's also a call for Labour to directly address the concerns of those who backed Brexit, including immigration.
Conference. This party must fully face up to this fact. Millions of lifelong Labour supporters voted to leave the EU, and let's be honest, they voted for change on immigration. We haven't yet even begun to show them that we understand why. And I don't want to hear this party make the patronising argument that people didn't understand their referendum vote. They understood it very well.
Throughout this conference, the parties mostly managed to maintain a sense of calm after a stormy year. Most agree the question of leadership is settled for now and want to move on. But there are still big differences on policy, like immigration, and the party's future direction. 4 million children. That's what this man must resolve, starting with his speech on this stage this afternoon. He'll promise power for local councils to borrow to invest in things like housing and action on climate change and inequality. But to make policy pledges a reality, Jeremy Corbyn knows he must make peace in his party. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Liverpool.
Well, our assistant political editor, Norman Smith, is in Liverpool. Norman, as the conference draws to a close, which word best sums up what's been happening over the last few days? Unity or division?
Well, Clive, Mr Corbyn would like unity to be the key word, and that is going to be the central message of his big speech. He'll appeal for an end to the trench warfare between the different factions that are so scarred the party. He'll warn of a general election next year, in effect saying to his party, look, you've got to behave. We could be plunged into an election campaign. And yes, there'll be those big popular announcements, for example, allowing councils to borrow to build more council homes. But it's his comments on immigration which risk undermining that unity message. His suggestion that numbers don't matter, that he's not bothered about getting immigration down, because to many Labour MPs it just sounds as if he's not listening to the concerns of ordinary voters, almost as if he's putting two fingers up to those who voted for Brexit, as if he's oblivious to the pressure MPs in northern seats are under from UKIP, and that it's fine to say that sort of thing in London and metropolitan areas. It goes down well in the allotment sheds of Islington, but it doesn't reflect the views of Britain more broadly. And you sense that successive Labour leaders have just really struggled with this issue of immigration. Indeed, one Labour MP said to me this lunchtime that immigration was now the toxic issue for Labour, more so than economic credibility.
OK, Norman, thank you. Norman Smith there in Liverpool. The Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, has won a High Court fight with junior doctors in England over new contracts. The group Justice for Health mounted a legal challenge, arguing the contract was unsafe and unsustainable, and the government didn't have the power to impose it. The ruling comes just a week before the new terms and conditions are due to begin. Well, our health editor, Hugh Pym, is at the High Court for us now. Hugh, is this the end of the road for the dispute, do you think?
No, I don't think it's the end of the road, Clive, but it is a significant victory for the government. Junior doctors had taken Jeremy Hunt to court, challenging the way he has brought in this controversial new employment contract for junior doctors in England. They alleged that he'd done so unlawfully. They alleged that he hadn't done it in a transparent way, explaining why he wanted the contract changed, and also challenging his policy of a 7-day NHS, the government's policy, linking this new contract to the government's ability to extend NHS services over weekends. And on all three counts, the judge, Mr. Justice Green, found in favour of the government and Jeremy Hunt, saying that he acted rationally and lawfully. So that's been welcomed by the Department of Health, who say it's important now for junior doctors to move on with this new contract and for a dialogue about how it's going to be introduced from early next month. The BMA, British Medical Association, has already called off strikes. It says it wants to carry on with its campaign against the contract. It says it remains very unpopular amongst junior doctors. And what Justice for Health, the junior doctors organisation, is saying, the judge did say in court that Mr. Hunt had no power anyway to actually impose this contract, to force it on employers, which is the individual trusts. And what they're saying is there now needs to be a debate amongst trusts, the NHS employers, about whether they really do want to introduce it, that they have the power not to do so. So that is the way they're taking it forward. There is a debate going on about costs. The government is saying the junior doctors campaign group, Justice for Health, should pay the costs, £70,000, and the money will go to charities. That in turn will be contested by Justice for Health.
Hugh, thank you. Hugh Pym there at the High Court. Criminal investigators say they have evidence that the missile which destroyed flight MH17 2 years ago over eastern Ukraine was transported from Russia to rebels in the country. All 298 people on board the Boeing 777 died when it broke up mid-air en route from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. A team of international prosecutors confirmed the plane was shot down by a ground-based air defense system from a launch site controlled by pro-Russian rebels. One of the last of the founding fathers of modern Israel, Shimon Peres, has died at the age of 93. He twice served as Prime Minister and later as President, but his defining achievement was helping establish the Oslo Peace Accords, the political agreement of the 1990s that firmly backed the idea of a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Theresa May and Barack Obama will be among those attending the funeral on Friday. Yolande Nell now looks back at the life of Shimon Peres. Her report contains flash photography.
Shimon Peres was the last of a generation of leaders who founded the State of Israel in 1948. He became its eldest statesman, reaching out to the world and devoting himself to the search for peace.
There are people in Israel and elsewhere who say it's impossible to make peace between the Arabs and Israel or the Jewish people. I think they are wrong.
Born in Poland, Shimon Peres moved to the Holy Land as a child in the 1930s, when it was still under British rule. A protégé of Israel's founding father, he became a backroom operator, working on the defence deals that made Israel a formidable military power. Early on, he was a hawk who strongly supported the building of Israeli settlements on occupied Palestinian land. But later, a dovish Shimon Peres came to see these as an obstacle to peace. And this was a defining moment in his long career, helping to negotiate a first peace accord with the Palestinians in 1993. It never lived up to its promise, but it showed a deal could be done. And Mr. Peres was joint winner of a Nobel Peace Prize. It was as president, still serving after his 90th birthday, that the Israeli public truly took him to their hearts. Today, tributes have focused on his positive outlook.
He did so much to protect our people. He worked to his last days for peace and a better future for all. As Israel's president, Shimon did so much to unite the nation, and the nation loved him for it.
A remarkable list of world leaders is now expected in Israel for the funeral of Shimon Peres. Among them, Theresa May, Prince Charles and President Obama, who said he represented the essence of Israel itself.
Shimon Peres, who's died at the age of 93. It is 16 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. The former England boss, Sam Allardyce, has attacked the press after newspaper revelations forced him to step down as manager. And coming up, marathon man Ben Smith attempts an incredible challenge, 401 marathons in 401 days.
Coming up in South Today, trials for a new treatment for bowel cancer targeting the tumour's genetic makeup. And so far, so good. Reading's new green bus, which is actually orange. All that and more in 17 minutes.
Their motto is "Who Dares Wins," words soon to be etched into stone at the first ever permanent memorial to the SAS Special Forces Regiment. A large stained glass window depicting key moments in their history will be installed at Hereford Cathedral. The city's been their home since World War II. Phil Mackey has the story.
It's called Ascension. This is the first panel. Eventually there'll be 3,000 individual panes of glass and a sculpture. In the home of the SAS, it means a lot to the Special Forces soldiers, past and present, as well as their families.
I think it'll mean a great deal to the families of the regiment, both serving and retired. The veterans' wives and widows will have a permanent place where they can come, look at this marvellous window, reflect, and, you know, it's somewhere special.
The SAS was formed in the Second World War. Its exploits have become legendary in deserts and in jungles, and most famously at the Iranian embassy siege. More recently, fighting alongside regulars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But in its 75-year history, there's been a veil of secrecy that's meant no official memorial in Hereford.
We've always been known to be living in the Hereford area. And for something like this, for us to actually appear in front of the cameras or whatever, is because of what this is. This is happens to be our 75th year, and we were very keen that we had some form of memorial that looked at the past, the present, and the future. Some would say, you know, we're about 75 years too late. I don't think so. I think it's been well worth waiting to get something right.
Well, this is the official launch of the fundraising campaign. They need £1 million to turn that window into the stained glass memorial, and it's a really important moment for the regiment and for Hereford because there's been such a close bond between the two over 7 decades. To finally have something official to acknowledge that bond.
And then you move up through the zigs and the zags.
The regiment doesn't want a traditional window but has asked for it to be as colourful as possible.
The idea was to move from the floor of the cathedral to the vaulting of the aisle here, so it's an ascension from the ground to the sky.
Once complete, the memorial will make the traditionally secretive SAS more visible in its home city. Phil Mackey, BBC News, Hereford.
The widow of a Falklands War veteran has won her case to stop her frozen embryos being destroyed. Samantha Jeffries argued that they represent her last chance of having her dead husband's child. Well, our medical correspondent is at the High Court for us now. Fergus, just explain the background to all this.
Well, Samantha Jeffries and her husband Clive began fertility treatment in 2013. They were about to have the third cycle when Clive suddenly died in 2014 of a brain hemorrhage. Now, the couple had signed a 10-year storage consent form, including Clive Jeffries signing that he wanted those embryos to be used in the event of his death. But the clinic told Mrs. Jeffries that consent had expired, and it seems that the forms they'd signed were amended because they had 2 years of NHS funding. The clinic had amended them in order to make them comply with that period of funding. Now, the judge, Sir James Mumby, said it was obviously right that Mrs. Jeffries should be allowed to keep the embryos for 10 years, and he was sorry that she'd been made to come to court as a result of the mistakes of others. Samantha Jeffries said she was delighted. It put faith for her in the legal system, and she said she was 100% certain that her husband Clive would have wanted her to have his children.
OK, Fergus, thank you for that. Fergus Walsh there at the High Court. The government has been warned that plans to restrict the use of bail for suspects who haven't been charged are dangerous. The College of Policing, which sets standards and guidelines for officers in England and Wales, wants the proposal scrapped. Theresa May, when she was Home Secretary, suggested the plans would provide greater oversight of the police bail system. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent, Danny Shaw.
It was Paul Gambaccini who put the issue of police bail on the political agenda. The BBC radio presenter was investigated over allegations of sexual offences. He was told he wouldn't face charges, but only after spending almost a year on bail.
How do you feel about 3 years of your life wasted harassing journalists?
Tabloid journalists on bail for months over claims of corrupt payments also complained that police misused their powers. So 2 years ago, the government proposed a 28-day limit for police bail. Longer periods will need approval from a senior police officer and then a magistrate. But policing experts say the plans could backfire.
We think that there are real dangers in relation to the bureaucracy that's going to be created. We're worried about the message that it could send to victims. We're worried that suspects may not be clear about what's happening with their investigation, and that may not in fact address the problem that the legislation is intended to address.
Police say there's also a risk if suspects are under investigation but not on bail, information about them won't be shared between forces. That's what happened with Ian Huntley before he murdered 2 schoolgirls in Soham in 2002. A group of officers cited in the report suggests there could be more cases like Huntley's if the plans go ahead. But the Home Office has defended the reforms, saying the processes and culture of policing need to change. Danny Shaw, BBC News.
Tasting regional delicacies is a tried and tested ritual of royal tours, and for the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, the latest day of their Canada visit was no different. This time, it was wine tasting with a touch of culture, as our royal correspondent Peter Hunt explains.
The royals are learning firsthand about Canada's, at times, difficult relationship with its Indigenous population. One leader boycotted this event and has accused the government of failing to keep its promises to his people.
The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge.
Popular acclaim, not politics, was on offer inside the sports hall at this University of British Columbia campus. The couple, who are passionate about sport, were treated to an exhibition game of volleyball. Next stop on a tour that doesn't stop for long, a vineyard in the Okanagan Valley, where the region's food and drink were being showcased. Older royals tend not to partake in public. Younger royals have no such inhibitions. Fed, watered and headed north to Canada's Yukon Territory and a concert where the rhythm was infectious for a duchess who wasn't stepping on her prince's blue suede shoes. On this royal visit, William and Kate are seeing some of what Canada has to offer, what it's proud of, and its people are getting a chance, sometimes at close quarters, to see the future of the Canadian monarchy. They've swapped briefly their palace home for this vast and sparsely populated wilderness. Peter Hunt, BBC News, Whitehorse, Yukon.
We all know running a marathon is no joke. It's a huge achievement for anyone. So, imagine running a full marathon every 24 hours for 401 days. It's all for charity, of course, and John Kay has been to meet the marathon man, Ben Smith.
I'm not going to lie to you, some mornings I just don't want to get up out of bed.
In the last year, Ben Smith has run 10,000 miles. Across Britain.
But it's really cold.
In all weather.
Oh my God.
A marathon every day. He's worn out 22 pairs of trainers.
I've not had one blister or a missing toenail.
You've not had one blister?
No, not at all.
We joined him for a couple of miles in Portsmouth. Ben's marathon 392.
I've lost 19 kilos in weight. My body fat has dropped from 15.5% to just under 10, so 9.5. So I feel a lot fitter, a lot leaner, a lot healthier.
Achier?
Yeah.
In Aberdeen, he ended up in hospital with broken bones in his back.
Feeling really happy.
But remarkably, just 10 days later, he was running marathons again, and he's made up all the time and miles he lost.
I found through this that I'm quite mentally strong, so it's quite easy for me to kind of pick myself up out of a hole.
When he was young, Ben tried to take his own life.
I started to get bullied when I was 10 years old.
So during this challenge, he stopped at 100 schools. He's trying to raise £250,000 for anti-bullying charities. 9,000 people have joined him at different stages.
Give me some words to sum up this man.
Well, the obvious is inspirational. The next obvious is crazy. I mean, who does this? I mean, really.
What do you think of the 401? Oh.
At times, it has been lonely.
Nobody wants to be with me today. 3, 2, 1, go!
But as the months have passed, the crowds have grown. Ben's been described as a real-life Forrest Gump.
Are you going to miss it? I mean, when you stop, you're going to lie there in bed and say, oh, I really want to run a marathon again today?
No, I don't think so.
Just 7 days and 7 marathons to go. John Kay, BBC News.
It's one of sport's all-time greatest achievements. Frankie Dettori winning 7 races in 7 rides at Ascot, something that hasn't been matched on the feat's 20th anniversary. He said it cost the bookies £40 million and changed his life. Joe Wilson has been to meet him.
Any horse in the world he will smile alongside, but there are 7 Frankie Dettori will never forget.
Right, Wall Street.
Wall Street has won it from Simon Lauder. Priolina was third.
Diffident.
It's a photo between Diffident and Luque and Prince.
Mark of Esteem.
He completes a fantastic treble. Frankie Mark of Esteem has won it from Bosworthshire.
Decorated Hero.
It's going to be another for Frankie Dettori as they race up towards the line.
Faithfully.
Faithfully and Frankie Dettori bidding for this fantastic 5-timer.
Lock Angel.
But it looks like 6 for Frankie Dettori as they run up to the line.
Fujiyama Crest.
Fujiyama Crest finding a bit more, and it's 7 for Frankie.
You got it.
If I don't know, Rest gonna know.
Ascot, September the 28th, 1996. He went through the card. 7 races, 7 winners. Magnificent, unprecedented. And you can still measure the impact.
You know, bookmakers lost 40 million. And punters won 40 million for our England. So this last 20 years, I met so many people from all walk of life. You know, taxi drivers, businessmen, then won thousands and thousands on that day.
Did it change your life, Frankie?
It definitely changed my life. You know, I was a sportsman known in my sport, but all of a sudden I became well known to everyone.
He carried racing into living rooms, carried the torch. In 2012, Dettori was also banned for 6 months after failing a drugs test. Have you felt since 2012 that you needed to redeem yourself in the public eye, Frankie? Has that been part of your motivation?
Yeah, you know what? I've only got a few years left. I can't ride forever, so it's nice to have a resurgence or another chance that at least I can enjoy these later years being happy.
I wonder how on earth you could ever get anything which would match the excitement and the buzz of winning a big race.
I'll let you know when I retire.
Do you worry about that?
I do worry about it, of course.
Hollywood has just remade its Magnificent Seven, Denzel Washington and Friends. Tory, 46 in December, says he'll compete until he's 50, easy. But to see a perfect seven again, well, they wouldn't even script it in a movie. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
Talking of Hollywood, it was a case of Hanks for the memories for one couple in New York when their wedding day snaps were photobombed by Tom Hanks. The newlyweds Elizabeth and Ryan were having pictures taken in Central Park when the actor, out for a jog, popped in to say hello. Congratulating the couple, he even posed for pictures and took a selfie with them. There it is, and he put it on his Twitter account. He was even invited to the reception. Wonderful surprise. Any surprises in the weather? Darren Bett has the details. Hi, Darren.
Well, that's some surprising temperatures today, actually, Clive. We've got some warm air across the country. You only get the benefit of that, though, if you see the sunshine. Here in Fort William in Scotland, it's pretty grey, and there could be some more rain around through the rest of the day as well. I put the cloud on. You can see we've got clouds spilling in on a freshening southwesterly wind, but there are some breaks, some sunshine. Mepham, for one, in Kent, we'll see some more sunshine through the rest of the day, and already here temperatures are up to around 21 Celsius or so, so very warm for the time of year. There is this cloud, though. It's producing a bit of rain or drizzle. The more persistent rain will be pushing northwards into northern Scotland, so not so warm here through the rest of the afternoon, but as it brightens up, central belt southwards, perhaps temperatures are likely to shoot up. And across Northern Ireland, breaking some of that low cloud, we'll see the temperatures getting into the low 20s. Anywhere really across England and Wales, where we see a little sunshine, those temperatures are rising rapidly. Best of the sunshine towards the southeast, 23 degrees possible here. Even the likes of Cheshire, Merseyside seeing some sunshine, some warmth, but there is a bit more cloud and some drizzle around some other western parts. The warm air is in between these two weather fronts here. This one will sweep southwards, take some rain away from Scotland, Northern Ireland into England and Wales. Warm air ahead of it. Chillier air behind it, but we've got a deep area of low pressure approaching the northwest of the UK, so the winds really picking up overnight and into tomorrow, especially in Scotland. Some big waves in the northwest as well. But all the way down across the far north of England, A1, A66, some very gusty winds into tomorrow morning, widely 60 miles an hour across Scotland, maybe 75 in the northwest. Maybe the peak of the winds probably for around the rush hour in the morning, easing a bit during the afternoon. At the same time, we've got that band of rain that's not lasting too long. It's heading down towards the southeast, clearing away, and sunnier skies following by the afternoon across most of England and Wales. One or two showers perhaps, but most of the showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland, heavy ones here, frequent, and still some pretty lively gusts too, and a cooler, fresher feel. We keep that cooler air on the way for Friday. This time the winds are lighter. There'll be a scattering of showers and some sunshine too, but typical temperatures only around 14 or 15 degrees. And then as we head into the weekend, just in time for the weekend, we've got this, an area of low pressure heading our way. That's going to spoil the first half of the weekend. It will be quite cool actually through the weekend. Some chilly nights on the way, but feeling quite cool underneath. A lot of showers on Saturday, much drier and sunnier though on Sunday. Clive.
Darren, thanks for that. Now a reminder of our top story this lunchtime. Sam Allardyce attacks the press after newspaper revelations force him to step down as England manager. That's it. Now the news where you are. Have a very good afternoon.